So welcome to Brown Bag History for February 15th, 2023. We're going to be talking about the mining in the Lardo region today. And as we begin, we acknowledge that the land around Revelstoke and on the Columbia River and its tributaries is traditional Sinixt territory. And we acknowledge the ties of the Secwepemc, the Okanagan Nation Alliance, or Silks, and the Ktunaxa to this land, and acknowledge their use and habitation of this land, which is sacred to all of these nations. So this is a broad topic, and I was mentioning earlier that I've done sort of specific talks on, as well as talked about mining in the Lardo. I've also talked about specific talks on Camborne, Beaton, Trout Lake, and Ferguson, and on Mrs. Joeitt, who's one of the really well-known miners in the area. So I had altogether about 56 pages of material, and I whittled it down to 21, but I'll see how whether I can manage to be articulate enough today with trying to navigate all this material. So this is a from the Revelstoke Mining Division records map, probably from the early 1900s, showing some of the mining areas. This just shows sort of from Beaton and down through the Trout Lake area. There's also more significant mining up in the Camborne area as well. We do have quite a few other maps. I've just sort of shown a couple here today. There was a note from the Kootenay Mail newspaper in 1897 with a report on the Trout Lake Division. It said, like many other mining camps, now known chiefly for their quartz leads, Trout Lake Mining Division was first brought into notice through its placer gold on the main river of the camp, the Lardo. And it was mentioned that there was possibly some mining activity in the area in 1865 when people were starting to come up from the States into the Big Bend gold fields. And that said that in 1865, 4 boats journeyed up the Columbia from Fort Caldwell in the States to the Gold Stream River and French Creek. And that some members of that expedition examined the territory at the head of the northeast arm of the Upper Arrow Lake, which is basically this area here. And it said that apparently their efforts were not rewarded, and the subsequent rich finds on French and McCulloch Creek, 100 miles north, tended to turn all eyes in that direction. So that was what became the Big Bend Gold Rush of 1865, 1866. But it was really with 1885 and people coming into this area with railway construction that people started to look in that direction again. There was a note in the fall of 1885, Charles Holton and William Greenwood went into the area hunting, and they found some gold in the area. They and Holton and other partners, including John Stobbart, that Stobbart Lake is named after, and Thomas Downs, who later became his partner in the Enterprise Brewery in Revelstoke, were doing some exploration in the area. So they were kind of back and forth in the area, but it was really in the late 1880s, early 1890s that they located the Silver Cup mine and the place to claim. And that sort of became their sort of main claim for that in that time. You can see on this map, just along Trout Lake, there's what's referred to as Silver Cup Mountain. So the Silver Cup was sort of located in that area above Trout Lake. So it was really, but 1891, they started doing more dedicated mining on their claims. There was the gold commissioner stationed at Farwell in 1888 reported, the Lardo country has not been actively prospected during the past season, but I've seen some free milling gold quartz brought by trustworthy miners from the surface of a prospect located there. That was apparently the first official recognition of the mineral possibilities of the Lardo. By 1889, 10 locations had been made on the northeast arm of the Upper Air Lake. And there was also activity in the Fish Creek or in Comaplex River area as well. That note also said in 1889, good gold values were obtained from the Eva claim just north of Camborne. And you can see Camborne situated here up from the Fish River. And it said a small gold rush ensued, and during the next few years, many gold claims were staked and developed to various degrees. In 1892, it was reported that the Silver Cup mine, which had been established mostly by Holton and Downs and their partners, said it laid open a body of galena ore from 25 to 80 feet in width, the whole length of the claims. And the Silver Cup mine had ore samples which were assaying over 2,100 ounces of silver to the ton. Somebody with a mining background would understand that more than I do, I'm sure. In October of 1892, it was reported that Holton and his partners had been offered up to $20,000 for the Silver Cup mine, which would have been a really tremendous sum there. I haven't done the translation in currency, but it would have been a very significant amount of money. They eventually did sell the property, and it became part of the Ferguson Mines Limited, and which was operating both the Nettie L and the Silver Cup mines. Holton, with the money that he made from his mining, really established himself as an entrepreneur in town. He built what's still known as the Holton House at the top of First Street Hill, a beautiful heritage home. And he and his partner, Thomas Downs, started the Enterprise Brewery, which was in operation under different ownership until the 1950s. So the people were starting to go into the area a little bit more, establish it. And one of the early pioneers in the area was this man, J.W. Thompson. And he was the first registered school teacher in Revelstoke. There'd been an older girl who was teaching the younger children for a while in the old Wide West Saloon on Front Street. But Thompson was the first actual school teacher that was hired in 1889. And by 1890, he was doing some exploration in the Lardo area himself. And in July of 1891, said he had gone down to the Lardo country and said he was really gushing about the opportunities there. Said the trail into Trout Lake, just completed by Mr. J.W. Haskins, was an excellent piece of work, and the good results from its completion are already apparent. More than a score of prospectors are already working around the foothills and mountains with encouraging results. That there will be a stampede into the Lardo on the completion of the trail from Kootenay Lake to Trout Lake is almost a certainty, as the country is new and one of undoubted promise. So, and it was talked about being excellent stretches of land, and people were taking up land and establishing farms there as well, including Thompson and J.W. Haskins on Stobart Lake. So in 1891, it said that Thompson was planning on establishing a town site, and did that. And the area was first referred to as Thompson's Landing in April of 1892. This is a rather rough photograph that we haven't had retouched yet, but this is Thompson's Landing in 1897. And Thompson's Landing later became known as Beaton. One of Thompson's partners was Malcolm Beaton. And after a few years of having the post office trying to deal with the confusion of having the TL initials of Thompson's Landing and then TL initials of Trout Lake, became too much. So they said one of them has to change the name. So Thompson's Landing became Beaton. And it became quite a well-established place. There's the little dock at Beaton. We do have I didn't include in this talk, but we have quite a few later pictures of Beaton. Several years ago, we acquired a photo album from a woman named Doris Warkington, who was a school teacher at Beaton in the 1950s. So I think I've shown those slides before on another occasion. So I was just sort of focusing on the early history of Thompson's Landing at this time. So there was a lot of stagecoach activity. There were several packers in the area. There was Selden Daney, who's really well known as in terms of the packing work that he did. And another company that was established there was Craig and Hillman Stagecoach Company. And just this last fall, we received two very large 11 by 17 sized scrapbooks full of photographs and information about the whole Lardo area, including Trout Lake and Ferguson and Camborne and Beaton. And they were put together by a man named Andrew Alvin Craig, who was the son of Andrew McCulloch Craig, who was the partner with Craig and Hillman Company. And Andrew McCulloch Craig had come from Nova Scotia to this area in 1895 and established the company there. And they continued working until 1922. So there's near the end of the talk, I'll have more of a sample of photographs from that album. I just started scanning a few yesterday. Probably next fall, we'll do a talk specifically on that collection because really an amazing photographs. But this is one that was captioned by the son Andrew Craig, and it said, Thompson's Landings, the teams and wagons were made ready for the trips north to Camborne or on the east road to Trout Lake. Seen here is an outfit ready to leave, including freight train, wagon, and passenger stage in front of the hotel. So Beaton was really kind of a staging area for a lot of the mining activity and, the forest activity as well, because of its location right on the bank there and its connection to the roads into Camborne and then to Trout Lake. It was a sort of a good staging area and crossroads area. So in 1890, Andrew Abrahamson, who's one of the several brothers that had come to Revelstoke in 1885 and established the Central Hotel on Front Street. Andrew, one of the brothers, along with his dog Watch and his cat Molly, who went everywhere with him, and a pack on his back, went down into the Lardo area, said he found his way around the north arm of the Arrow Lake from Arrowhead, because there was no other means of transportation of the North Arm at that time. His travels took him to the Lardo country, where he arrived at the head of the beautiful Trout Lake. He staked the land at the head of the lake and called it Trout Lake City. He built a log house, and it was a welcome shelter for hundreds of miners and prospectors who later came in search of gold. Mentions that Andrew met J.W. Haskins, who had located and staked several claims in the area. So the Abrahamsons established the town site of Trout Lake, and by 1893 they were selling lots there. And some of the streets were named after their first names, like Andrew and John Street. So there was, it became quite a booming town. I think in one of the directories, it mentions that, let's see, in 1898, there were 55 listings at Trout Lake City. So that would have been sort of families or heads of households. So would have been more people than that. It was just like 55 the households or businesses. C.B. Hume, who had the big department store in Revelstoke, also had a branch store there, and another one at Arrowhead. This is actually a photograph that was reproduced on C.B. Hume's business calendar that he put out in 1904. So the Abrahamson brothers, Charles, John, Andrew, and Noah, laid out the town site and started selling lots in 1893. They built the Queen's Hotel in Trout Lake City, which was managed by Andrew and Noah. This is a photograph that came from the albums the scrapbooks that I was mentioning. And he did something that you're not supposed to do, which was write on photographs, but it does give us information. Talks about Dad's harness shop, so that'd be Andrew Craig, a government office in the school listed in there. In 1898, it mentioned that C.B. Hume was the official postmaster, although he'd probably contracted that out to somebody, but he was listed as postmaster. It was listed as a mining camp on Arrow Lake, 9 miles by wagon road from Thompson's Landing, and Arrowhead distance 24 miles. It had a weekly paper and was a distributing point for the Lardo district. There was a druggist, Frank Aby, 5 ranchers, 6 miners, 6 lumbermen or mill workers, 6 teamsters, 3 mining men, and 9 store owners or clerks, 3 carpenters, 1 barber, 1 bricklayer, 1 blacksmith, 1 shoemaker, 4 hotels, and a newspaper. And by 1899, the directory had gone from 55 listings in 1898 to 161 listings, so in the course of a year. So it was really experiencing a boom at that time. This was in the Craig album. I'd never seen anything like this before. Hurry and come to Trout Lake this very day. Don't wait until you're old and gray. It said August 1918. Now, this is a photograph that I'd never seen before. It was also from the Craig album of the school. And I didn't realize that they'd had a school of that size, and quite an interesting design. It was a bit more elaborate than a lot of the one-room schoolhouses that you see in the area. And I believe that one of the Abrahamson women from the O.W. Abrahamson family taught school there at one point as well. Some of the names that are listed, the name Wilkie, he was a mining engineer. Godso, I think they were related to the Craig family. Jacobson, Craig, Madden's had a hotel there. LeBeau. So as again, you're not supposed to write on photographs, but it's kind of nice to have that information. Would have preferred they'd done it on the back of the photos. We have a bell in our basement, which we believe came from the school. One of the really well-known people from that area was Alice Elizabeth Joeitt. And she was born in England in 1853 and was married and had some children. And her husband either died or they were separated. And she came out to Canada in 1891 and was first running a bakery and on Cordova Street in Vancouver, and then heard about some of the opportunities in the Lardo. So she brought her children out to the Lardo by about 1896 and originally bought the Trout Lake Hotel and then eventually bought the Windsor Hotel, which still exists in Trout Lake. And it was said that she would make 50 loaves of bread at a time, and as well as using it in her hotel, she also sold bread. And she had a double oven, which took 10 loaves in each oven. And she usually had like 15 to 20 boarders at a time. And the local bachelors would come in and buy her bread. I've done a whole talk on her So I won't go into too much detail about her right now, but really incredible person. She was a prospector. She had several claims. She was probably one of the most successful miners in the Lardo. There was a note in 1918 said, "Lady prospector strikes it rich at Trout Lake." Said Trout Lake has a lady prospector who for nearly 20 years has gone into the hills year after year and looked after her own assessment work on the claims she holds. Mrs. Joeitt, who is a pioneer of Trout Lake City, now seems to have struck it rich, for she has sent out a trial shipment from a property she owns, which gave her a return of $100 a ton in gold. So this is her in the entrance to her cabin, along with several other women. And this was her Foggy Day claim around 1900. She continued to work her claims until she was well into her 80s, because at one point her son-in-law sort of wouldn't let anybody loan her, let her ride a horse, and she was quite annoyed about that. But she did continue to keep her claims and kept the hotel running as well. We actually have some crochet work that she did, some very fine samplers of crochet work. And I crochet, but I wouldn't attempt to do this kind of work. It's extremely fine lace crochet work. So she was quite a remarkable person. And as I say, I've done a whole talk on her, so I won't talk about it too much more right now. This is another photograph that I scanned yesterday from the Craig album, and what was known as the Alpine Basin, where she had a claim. Alice Joeitt died in 1955 at the age of 101. She had really just within the last few years before her death had gone into a nursing home in Kelowna, but she'd lived most of her life in Canada at the hotel and doing her mining. So really a remarkable person. It's a picture of the Windsor Hotel in the 1950s, getting a little rundown. And there's a picture of the Trout Lake gas station, both in the 1980s. Unfortunately, this problem with Zoom, so it puts that little bar there, so you can't really see his eyes. That's a man named Dave Ferguson, and the town site of Ferguson was named after him and his brothers. They came into the area in 1891, and they were doing some mining work in the area, and he was actually trained as a mattress maker. But he ended up doing mining in the area, and they established this town site. By 1891, it was the town site was pretty much established. There's another note saying that I guess there were people there prior to that, but it was 1896 that it was formally named. There was a note from a mining newspaper that said a new town by the name of Ferguson has been started at the forks of the Lardo, about 15 miles from Thompson's Landing, or Beaton. It is surrounded by several important groups of mines, many of which are only between 1 and 2 miles distant. So Ferguson is sort of up the hill from Trout Lake, so it was higher up than Trout Lake, so it was actually closer to a lot of the mine fields. So it became a really good spot for people to establish themselves for mining in the area. There's a picture from, this is November 21st, 1901, Ferguson Hotel, the biggest in the town. And that was originally run by the Ferguson brothers. This picture was also from the Craig album. This is Selden Daney's pack train in Ferguson in 1900. You can see the hotel there, Balmoral Hotel and the Cummins Merchants. There's a picture of the Ferguson, about 1901, covered in snow. and again, the main street of Ferguson. And this building here is McKinnon and Sutherland. That was a men's clothing store. And then McKinnon and Sutherland moved into town, and they bought the building that was is now Padrino's Pizza, and ran that as a men's clothing store as well. They were not related. Yeah, they were both McKinnons, but they weren't related. There was the McKinnon's clothing store, men's clothing store, and the McKinnon's pool hall, but not related as far as we know. No, the pool hall was where the that hotel is now. And the McKinnon and Sutherland men's clothing store was where on the corner of Connaught. So this is Danny's snowplow around 1900 in Ferguson. So because it was so much higher, they had a lot more snow to deal with there. There's a picture of a flume into the mines. And the Lawton family, there were three brothers, Robert, Jack, and Alexander, who came to Canada from the Orkney Islands of Scotland in 1892. And they ended up settling in Ferguson, and operated the Lardo Hotel there. They were, one of the Lawtons was still had the hotel operating in 1958, when there wasn't much happening in the area anymore, but they were still there. This is a picture of Ferguson in July of 1961. And then in 1946, an Earl Dickey photograph, and you can see things were starting to fall apart at that time. This is a picture of the Ferguson brothers pack train going to the Triune mine. So a lot of these mines were very high up in the mountains. So there was lots of packing involved in getting things in. So another area was Camborne, which was up the Fish Creek from the northeast arm. And it also was fairly high up. And then there were people going high into the mountains above Camborne for mining. Camborne was started by a man named Corey Meninick, who came to Canada from Cornwall, England. And he was actually trained as a miner in mining and civil engineering in Camborne School of Mines in Cornwall. So when he came out here, he took the name Camborne for his new community, and they were in this area in the 1890s, and so he purchased 188 acres on the flat where Pool Creek enters the Fish River. The Pool Creek watershed was aligned perfectly with the chain of claims along Trout Lake. It was the first open space above the Fish Canyon, and there was ample water power to put in a processing plant if they found ore on the nearby mountains. So he had the land surveyed and named the town Camborne in about 1899 or 1900. And you can see it was another fairly substantial little mining town at the area. This is Craig and Hillman's coach leaving Camborne around 1902. And you can see there's families on the coach as well. Two of the big mines in the area were the Eva and the Oyster Criterion mines. And the gold claim Eva was staked in July of 1899 on Lexington Mountain. And a syndicate from Montana took ownership of the Eva and worked 200 feet of tunnel in that area in 1899. So I've got tons of material here, and I didn't get it all sorted. So if I'm a little bit not that clear here, there's lots of material about it, and not going to read all of it. Here's a little note from June of 1901. It said 40 claims recorded in one day. An interesting story of the free gold excitement at Comaplex. Men were staking claims on the gold belt, which is now known to strike across Fish Creek, taking in 7 Mile, 9 Mile, and Menhinnet Creeks, going through Sable Creek and thence to Isaac Creek. So it looked like on one day, 4 men were traveling up the creek of the view of staking some extensions on the Sunset Mineral Claim. And when 1.5 miles up the creek, one of them picked up a piece of quartz, which was studded all over with gold. The trail here runs at the foot of a ridge or hogback, which they found was caused by a quartz ledge of extraordinary richness, and the vein being harder than the adjacent formations naturally stood higher. They prospected the ledge and staked claims for each member of the group, but they agreed to keep the matter quiet for a couple of weeks to allow the snow to go so that they could make the best locations for their claims. But one of the original 4 went into the hotel at Camborne and showed people there was probably alcohol involved. And he showed somebody in the newspaper account said he was filled up on liquid joy. And let the cat out of the bag. He displayed to the assembled prospectors and miners chunks of gold quartz, which dazzled their eyes and made their mouths water. They picked out all the information necessary from the joyful one, and then went to their bedrooms, ostensibly to sleep, but in reality, getting out of the hotel as quickly as possible and heading for the gold strike. Some were so anxious to get out that they let themselves out of the bedroom windows and, tying the bed sheets together, lowered themselves to the ground. Next morning, the cook prepared breakfast for 15 men, only to find they were all gone, even the proprietor. Said that people from Comaplex and Thompson's Landing joined in the rush, with 40 claims recorded at Comaplex in one day. And said one on the Eva, over 1,000 feet of tunnels, uprises, etc. And there's enough free milling gold ore in sight to run a 20 stamp mill for 2 years. So into the early 1900s, there was still a lot of action going on in the area. This is the Oyster Criterion stamp mill and tramway at Camborne. So a lot of these operations, they were running the stamp mills and as well to support the mines. This is a picture of the Eva mine mill at Camborne from 1905. This is another recent photograph that came into our collection from the Young family at Albert Canyon. Most of them were from the collection of William Orville Young, who did a lot of mining, both in Canada and in the United States, in the Albert Canyon and Illecilla areas as well. This is the Camborne Hotel around 1910. And now, Camborne is one of the areas that when a lot of the other mines in the area were kind of coming and going, the Camborne, they kept having some upsurges. There was enough mineral there to make it worthwhile for new companies to come in. So there was an upsurge in the 1930s. And let's see if I can find that. As I said, I do have a bit too much more information than I need here. Yeah, there was a note from 1927. So the Lardo Mines Exploration Company has developed the Paymaster Group on Lexington Mountain by a cross-cut tunnel, which has already been driven 35 feet to intercept the ore chute at depth, which has been exposed on the surface. And in 1934, there was a mention that the Teddy Glacier was going to be worked by British capital. This is a picture of it's referred to as the mine dump at the Teddy Glacier mine. And you can see it was very high country to get into there, and the pack trains had a lot of work to do to get the equipment up in there. There was a fellow named W.V. Ring who had a panorama camera, and we have quite a few photographs that he took in this area. We believe around 1935. Some of the the mines in Camborne. And then he also took several photographs of the highway construction camps in the Big Bend. But this is the one that he did of the pack train. And then these were ones that we couldn't scan as a single photograph because they were these really long panoramas. So we scanned them in two pieces, sort of put them together. But there's a picture that he took of the Teddy Glacier mine above Camborne in around 1935. And another one. You can see just how high they were working there. In the 1911 census, there'd been 49 people living in Camborne, including people working for the government, mining, hoteliers, river driving, and gardeners. And by 1920, there was little activity in the area, but as I said, there were a couple of these little upsurges. We have quite a few other photographs, which I didn't include today, of some of the operations in the 1930s. And then there was another upswing in the 50s when the company came in there. In the 1930s, there was a note that the winter of 1935, the company that was running the Teddy Glacier mine hired a decommissioned World War I airplane equipped with skis to dump cargo off of the wings, which probably not a good idea. There was an interview with Avery Gunterman, who lived most of his life in Beaton. And he said, a crew of men was brought in to clear the deep snow off the mud flats at Beaton. One bag of coal was loaded onto each wing, about 100 pounds, and a 50 to 100-foot rope attached to each bag. The pilot flew over the mine camp as low as he could, and then released the bags. Drill steel was taken up the same way. One day they got a little careless and put some rod right through the cookhouse roof just before the men were about to enter for a meal. And when I was showing the pictures of the pack train into there, it could be very treacherous work. And in December 24th of 1934, two brothers, Kenneth and Cyril Chaston of Winnipeg, died in a slide on their way to the mine at Camborne. So between 1935 to 1941, the activity consisted mainly of mill cleanup and salvage projects. And then there was a resurgence of exploration and development in the 1950s. And the spider mine was brought into production in 1952 and continued operations until 1958. So there's a picture of the Sunshine Lardo company at Camborne in 1952. So I was telling you about this album from the Craig family, or two albums, or two big scrapbooks. And unfortunately, the photographs are all glued into the scrapbooks, which again, please don't ever do that. And please don't write on your photographs. But the material in these books is absolutely astounding. And we will be scanning all of them. It was the son of this couple that put the scrapbooks together. And he was born in Trout Lake in 1911, I believe. And he has written out whole sections from the Trout Lake newspapers. He's done this huge a lot of writing, text about what his father was doing and about growing up in Trout Lake. So just an absolute mine of material. So certainly it's the kind of stuff that makes me very excited. So I just scanned a few of the photographs yesterday and I'll show you those now. So this is Andrew McCulloch Craig, and he married Annie Ellen Valentine in Revelstoke in 1897. Valentine had come out here from the United States with her father, and one of her sisters married William Tomlinson, who was a local railway engineer. So if any of you knew Michael Tomlinson, he was a grandson of William and Mrs. Tomlinson. So they were related. And there's actually some photographs in the album of the Tomlinson children out Trout Lake as well with the Craig children or cousins. This is picture, letterhead from 1898 from the Craig and Hillman, the general cartage agents for the Lardo and Trout Lake districts. And this is hard to see on the slide, but this is an example of the kind of material that's in the album. There's also a color photograph or a color map of the mines in the area. And he's done all of this annotation of the map. So here's an example. This is Joeitt. I can't even read that. Bonded the foggy day to Silver Crown, Spokane. So just incredible information that's available in these two scrapbooks. There's another picture of the Sunshine Lardo mine. This is a little later photograph. And then here's a few more from the Craig album, showing the road, little bridge over the North Fork above Ferguson. And showing the Fish Creek Canyon Road to Camborne. Yeah, the bridges are interesting. Lardo Pass, that this road started May 23rd, 1894. So I don't know if that's the road up above Trout Lake. It kind of looks like, because I mean, even now it's not that great a road. And it says, Dad, 4 heavies and Chummy Johnson. So it'd be his 4 heavy draft horses he's referring to. And look at the wagon there. So we had cartage wagons as well as passenger wagons. Now this is an incredible photograph. It said Craig and Hillman hauling pressure pipe for light plant at Ferguson mine across ice from Arrowhead, winter 1899. Just incredible. And another great photograph said one fast way down from the mines was to slide on canvas or ore sacks on the glacier tongues. Fast indeed. Another absolutely incredible photograph. This is from Meridian Mine, Goldfinch, and showing the tram line there. Never seen a photograph like that before in our collection. And then I'll end it with this one of Brown Creek Basin, and I'm not entirely sure where that is. We'll have to look a bit closer at maps, but look at the terrain there. And if you look closely to see what's going on, this woman is holding a rifle, pointing a rifle, and there's a little girl there on one end of a crosscut saw with the man sawing a log. Just absolutely stunning photograph. That one got me really excited. So you can just imagine my delight, going through these two scrapbooks. So we'll be able to have a little bit more of a look at that later. So I just wanted to end with this slide from an article in the Revelstoke Review, September 28th, 2016. So Daryl Davis makes high-grade gold discovery near Trout Lake. And so he had his own exploration company, and there's still people mining. There's still companies that have claims in the area, and there's still some activity going on in there. As I say, I just very barely scratched the surface of this topic, but just mostly wanted to show you the amazing photographs and tell you a little bit about this story. Just coming up next week, 2 weeks from today, next Brown Bag History, guest speaker John Woods will be talking about Peter Scherer and his legacy of avalanche research. Peter Scherer was really instrumental in the avalanche mitigation on Rogers Pass Highway. He was working there in the 1950s to determine the avalanche mitigation program, that's some of which is still in place today. And Peter just passed away last year, well into his 90s. So John will be talking about that. And also upcoming on February 25th, we're doing a little Heritage Day. We'll be drop-in all day. We're going to do tours of our basement storage area at 11. So if you haven't had a chance to see the basement before, that's your time to do it. And then I'll do a heritage slideshow at 2. And we'll probably have other things going on during the day if you want to drop in. And then on March 16th, we're saying goodbye to this exhibit that we've had up since 2017. And we're going to have a little reception and a live and silent auction of the photographs that we have on the walls here. So you might, if there's some photographs here you're interested, that's the time to come and see if you can get one of them. So thank you for joining us today.